outcomes are very tightly connected to the overall mission, and that there is a logic chain that follows this through. So that's the strategic underpinning of everything that we do. So we start off with the strategy, the overall organization strategy, and then we come on to the Brightside digital strategy. And we've developed this in recent years with advice from a trustee from Google who sits on our board, and also from Bain Consulting. And the digital strategy is designed to meet the business objectives in the Brightside business plan, which I'll come on to in a second. Just one thing that I think is worth emphasizing at this stage is that, particularly with tech and the way that people use digital, it's important to get regular feedback. And not to let your strategy, which may have, you may set at one point and it looks out over the next 3 years, to be set in stone for that time. So we conduct regular surveying with each of our stakeholder groups, which are mentees, mentors, and the partners that we work with. We review this feedback in a systematic and structured way every 6 months to make sure that our plans are current and appropriate. We may tweak what we're doing. We may tweak prioritization based on that feedback. And then we will refresh the strategy every 2 years. Now, in terms of the Brightside business plan objectives, there are a number which I've laid out on this slide. So overall, we want Brightside to be a sustainable organization led by impact, which reaches 17,000 mentees a year by 2022. So you'll remember that I said we're at about 10,000 a year now. So quite a bit of growth that we're looking to develop there. And there are four kind of pillars, I suppose, in which we structure our work. So the first is about increasing reach. The second is about operating sustainably and efficiently. The third is to ensure that mentees have a good quality experience that achieves high impact. And then the fourth is around improving long-term outcomes. And what we have done with our digital strategy is structure the work streams against each of those objectives. So in terms of increasing reach, I mentioned earlier that we get regular systematic feedback from users to ensure that we have an engaging experience. There's a huge amount of pressure on young people's time, both when they're online and offline. And for us to be seen as something that they want to do, we've got to make sure that the online platform is as engaging as possible. And we've spent a lot of time and some resource to ensure that we do that. Operating sustainably and efficiently, it's absolutely crucial to ensure that when young people are on our platform, that they don't disengage because they're not having the best quality experience. That is not an efficient way of operating. So that is how technology helps to meet that objective. All of our changes in our digital strategy are assessed against those 6 theory of change objectives, promoting soft skills and knowledge acquisition. So when I was talking about growth mindset, self-efficacy, coping, hope, knowledge, etc., all of the technology changes are assessed to see how it contributes to that strategic objective. And then finally, we are coming towards the end, actually, of a very big data management project to bring together our different strands of information, which look at mentee engagement data, which look at long-term outcomes, and which look at demographic data, and putting that into one place that we can easily analyze. And that helps us to assess much more clearly what is happening on the platform to the young people that are on there, and helps us to more efficiently see how we are improving long-term outcomes. And the key bit of that, of course, is getting the heat data that is then aggregated with all of those other data sources. And that is going to save us a lot of time and make us much more effective in assessing how we improve long-term outcomes. So that's the end of my bit of the presentation. And what I just really wanted to emphasize was the importance of making sure that what you do in your digital strategy aligns with your other plans, your other objectives. And Laura is going to talk in a bit more detail about how we structure our projects to do that.
Thanks, Anand. And I guess before I kind of move into the nitty gritty of how we do this at Brightside, to reiterate what Anand has said, and to kind of I guess offer some reassurance. I imagine that a number of you are on this webinar because you didn't have a digital strategy in place. You have been forced into thinking digitally, and how you kind of ensure that you're reaching your target audiences in new and innovative ways that you weren't expecting, because you can't deliver the activities that you originally intended given the current circumstances. Whilst Brightside obviously has been around for 17 years, and we've always had technology at the heart of everything we do, and therefore kind of have a long-term strategy that already thinks digitally. Some reassurance for you that you don't need to be intimidated by that. I think that the way that we deliver things at Brightside is by really thinking about the outcomes first, and then thinking about how you deliver that. And I guess my reassurance for you guys is, from a kind of strategic level, you can, if you keep those outcomes in mind, then you'll come up with something that will work, but also at kind of a project by project or program by program level, which is what I'll go into now. If those outcomes are all linking, as Anand said, we have an overall strategy, and our technology strategy fits directly into that. It is built in order to help us achieve those wider strategic directives. If you keep that in mind, then you've got a good chance of success. So don't worry that you haven't got 17 years of kind of thinking about technology and thinking about online engagement backing you up. There are kind of quick wins that I know that you guys are looking for. So with that in mind, I wanted to talk you through what Brightside's approach is to kind of project planning and project management. Anand, could you move on? Thank you. This is the first time I've been able to boss him. I'm quite enjoying it. He's gone quiet. So as I say, there's some if you start thinking about kind of what is out there digitally, and I'm sure you're doing that right now, and Google is a terrifying thing. There are so many different types of digital outreach that are out there, and they can be IAG resources. You can deliver online mentoring, online tutoring, online communities. There are facilities like Zoom where you can deliver webinars. There are all sorts of kind of functionality, all aiming to do a different type of thing. And I guess at this stage, what you need to consider is what is best. What is the type of technology or digital strategy that is going to work for you, the resources you have available to you, and the outcomes that you're looking to achieve. What I would suggest, and what Brightside do, is that rather than thinking about the tools that you could use, you think about the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. So a really good example of this is everyone wants an app. Got to have an app. And that's a really kind of a quick win. People go, right, I need a website and I need an app. But what they don't think about, or is easy to forget, is why. Why do you want a website, and why do you want an app? What audience are you trying to reach with both of those tools, and what are you trying to achieve with those tools? And before you hit that kind of development button, or the purchasing something button, or building something from scratch, what you should really be thinking about is, what is it that I'm looking to achieve with this tool? And that will help you filter what's out there and what's right for you, and what's right for kind of your activity, and your the beneficiaries that you're trying to reach. Anand, could you move on, please? Thank you. So as Anand kind of started with, at Brightside, we are huge advocates of the theory of change model, and largely actually, and I should kind of talk about why it is that I'm particularly passionate about the theory of change, and ultimately it's because I'm a project manager. My entire career in widening participation has been from a project management and delivery perspective, and so I'm always looking for something that is very much linked to action and linked to the beneficiaries. And what I find so empowering about a theory of change model is the fact that it asks you to think about that outcome and think about those end users from the very beginning, and then everything else maps back from there. So a theory of change model may be kind of sold to you as an evaluation methodology, but in fact, if you really unpick it, it's a project management tool, and that is why I love it dearly. So at Brightside, we take that kind of theory of change approach with everything that we do at each individual project or program that we have. And we first and foremost ask ourselves, what is it that we are looking to achieve with a young person, with our beneficiaries? So it could be that we're really trying to affect a young person's human capital. We want to ensure that they come out of a particular period of time with us with an increased human capital, increased knowledge about maybe accessing higher education. So that's what we've kind of got in our main sites. For you guys, it may be that you're coming to us from UniConnect consortia, and that you're really thinking about impacting on those applications to higher education. You've got a target that's kind of been given to you, and you need to break that down into smaller outcomes that lead to that kind of that target figure. Once we have established that kind of outcome or overall aim, then we start thinking about the realistic side of things. So what is the situation in which we are working? So if I'm thinking right now, I'm thinking about a group of year 13 students who have had all of their structures removed from them. They're no longer taking exams. Everything that they thought was going to happen is not happening for them. They're sat at home. They have probably applied for university and are considering whether they should be turning up in September. What would they be turning up to in September? What does everything about what they're going through now has kind of been removed. So I'm thinking about that particular situation, and I'm thinking about the fact that I cannot invite them to a face-to-face event. So that's a fact. That's the situation in which I am working within. So once I've kind of given myself that little bit of a kind of wake-up call, then I start thinking about the things that I have available to me. So we talk about them at Brightside as the inputs. So what inputs do I have available to me to achieve that outcome? But other kind of ways of looking at it is our tools or resources, people, budget. What is it that I have that I can throw at this challenge to achieve the outcomes that I'm looking to? So at Brightside, the way that we start breaking that down is we start thinking, okay, so we know that we've got an online platform, but our online platform does many, many things. So what type of situation is going to support these young people? So is it kind of a really good example is on our platform, we can do a number of different ways of communicating with young people. They can have a one-to-one match. So they can have direct access to a role model, and it's just the two of them having a conversation. It's very personalised. They can be in a group situation, so 1 to 6, one mentor to kind of 5 or 6 young other kind of peers, and they can work together on a task or kind of have that kind of peer networking support. We have kind of communities or forum-based functionality. So that's kind of it's pure peer support that can be kind of developed or led by kind of one student ambassador or one mentor. And what we need to consider is what type of communication is going to work for that outcome. So if it's human capital, that if I go back to my original example, if it's human capital that I'm trying to achieve, how best am I going to get information to that young person or young people? Actually, that could be through communities. I could just post some resources, some passive resources to young people, which means that I know that they're going to have access to that human capital. So it's really kind of breaking down what do I have available to me and kind of lining all of that up and kind of matching it to the outcomes. And once we've done that, then we go back in and we check ourselves. So you don't get carried away with building up these kind of activities which are huge and expensive and complicated. You go back to the very beginning, which is what effect is the input going to have on the outcome? So if I provide one-to-one communication, do I feel confident that it's going to provide human capital to that young person or young people? And if I do feel reassured that it's going to, and that can be done, you can make that based on previous experience of peers. There is research out there. You can do that in a number of different ways. I would always say do it in a pragmatic way, and think about how much time you've got to play with. But do I feel confident that that's going to achieve the outcome? If the answer to that is yes, then the next question you should ask yourself is, how do I check that that is happening? And that's where your kind of evaluation methodology should come in. So your baseline and exit surveys, or some focus group type things, just to make sure that the thing that you are just about to do, your strategy that you're just about to take a step into, you are checking along the way that it is actually doing what you wanted it to do. And can you? Thank you. And once you've got this beautiful plan that is definitely going to achieve all of those outcomes, and you've kind of really thought about all of the resources, all of the tools, and people and budget that you've got, you then need to go back to that reality check. And that's when I call it reality check. Most people would call it risk and mitigation, but I always think risk and mitigation sounds dull. And actually, looking at a project in the kind of real world is kind of part and parcel of project planning and design. So the first thing that we do at Brightside is we assess the design itself. So is it smart? We always ask young people to think about smart targets. Do we ask ourselves enough? Is what we're just about to do smart? So is the plan that we've got specific and measurable? So can we actually check that it's going to work? Is it achievable and realistic? And can I achieve it within the time that I've got? So in these times now, that's why I kind of started talking about the fact that you guys don't have 17 years to come up with a digital strategy. You've got kind of a shorter amount of time to kind of put something together. So you need to work within your 3-month, 6-month digital strategy now, and think, right, okay, well, there's no point in me coming up with a very convoluted plan that's going to take 12 months to implement, when actually what I need to do is I need to get something launched in the next 2 months. So really do kind of think about how complex and complicated you are making your plan at this stage. The thing at Brightside that we always ask ourselves, and is absolutely tied into our digital strategy, is it engaging for young people? They are the beneficiaries that we're trying to kind of serve, and is the plan that we're putting together in any way engaging to them? So it may be, from an academic perspective, incredibly robust, but if they don't want to do it, then it isn't going to achieve the outcomes. So we really need to consider that kind of whether it's engaging. The other crucial element, particularly when we're talking about online, and you will be hearing this and thinking this yourselves, is it safe? We are able much more to control that kind of face-to-face environment, and there are kind of standard ways of ensuring that young people and adults are communicating in a safe way. You need to take that as seriously when you're doing it online, and so questioning yourselves at this stage before you move into delivery is really crucial. The next thing that we ask ourselves is, what do our stakeholders need to see? So again, you might have created this lovely kind of bells and whistles approach, but if it isn't going to do, if the outcomes don't link to what your stakeholders need, then it's going to fail at the first hurdle. Some mitigation tactics that we would then always kind of move to is, are there ways that you can incorporate your learner voice into your design and planning? And that doesn't need to be as time consuming as sometimes it is kind of portrayed. If you do have particularly engaged young people that you are still in contact with, or you've got a really great student ambassador pool who were very recently in school themselves, can you test the project plan at them? Can you say, right, that this is what we're planning on doing? Do you understand it? Do you think it's engaging? Is there anything else that we could be doing? It can actually just be some kind of phone calls that do some checking in for yourselves to give you that confidence that what you're putting together is robust and going to achieve what you want it to do. Think about your critical success factors. At Brightside, we have a number of those, and they're very little to do with the young people we're trying to reach. Actually, they tend to be around the infrastructure that's around those young people. So, do I have a good contact at that school? Do I have a robust way of getting to a young person to kind of nudge them to continue to participate? Do I have a number of kind of monitoring tools in place to ensure that after 5 weeks of a particular program, it's not falling flat? That I've got some really good kind of success milestones to work towards, and I also have ways of monitoring how things are going. So rather than kind of, I always use this example that if you were to go to, if you put together a summer school plan, you don't invite 120 year 10 students to your university and leave them at reception and hope that they have a good week. You put really good plans together and checkpoints to ensure actually they are having the time that they were supposed to, the outcomes that you were looking to achieve have been achieved, and everyone is kind of safe and knows what they should be doing. It's exactly the same when you're looking at kind of a digital strategy as well. Anand, can you?
Yeah.
Thank you. So I thought it would be useful to kind of show you a way that we put this into place at Brightside, and this is very recent because we're being as reactive as you guys are, in that we're kind of thinking, right, you know, this is new world, the situation for young people has changed and therefore we need to change with it. And this is, we've been asked to do this by a kind of number of people that we work with, which is we can't run summer schools in the way that we used to, but the outcomes that summer schools, we all know that summer schools are incredibly impactful to kind of a young person's journey and decision making. So how do we think about the outcomes that summer schools achieve and try and do them in a different way, which doesn't involve going to a university for a week? So we at Brightside have, and I won't go into this in full detail because the slides will be shared, but Brightside, we've looked at, okay, well, what are the outcomes that summer schools do achieve? And we've listed those out. I mean, there are way more than that, but you can see that I've kind of got 8 that are on the left-hand side there, which is that they help a young person to experience university life, they cover myth busting, they kind of crush any stereotypes that young people may have, they build motivation and aspiration, a sense of belonging, and then there are those kind of real behavioural concepts that are built into Brightside's theory of change as well. And we know that happens because some schools have been well researched and we see the impact that they can have. So we've really kind of thought about those outcomes and then thought about the tools that Brightside have at hand to apply to try and achieve those. So for us, it's thinking about that kind of the situation and the tools and inputs that we have to try and achieve those outcomes. But we've started with the outcomes first to ensure that we are mapping back into them. Anand, can you?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. And so, yeah, just to kind of summarise, really, the concepts that I've just talked you through aren't groundbreaking. You will be using them on yourselves whenever you're putting together your normal face-to-face activities. So the approaches are very familiar, and you all can do these things. I think that the key for Brightside and the thing that we kind of hold dear in everything that we do is that it is outcomes first and then you work backwards from that, rather than getting tied into the activities side of things. There's a few things that we always need to consider, and I would kind of say to you guys, you need to consider when thinking about delivering outreach online, and that is first and foremost for us at Brightside is safeguarding. One-to-one interaction from an adult and a young person around education guidance is seen as a regulated activity, and you need to ensure that your mentees or the young people that you're working with are always safe. So do consider the safety that you put around a young person's interaction with you when putting things online. Oh, sorry. Can you go back and?
Yeah, mea culpa.
Is this your way of telling me to speed up?
No, carry on.
Technology. So, and this is something that is part and parcel of our digital strategy. Development's really expensive. I could tell you how much Brightside has spent on technology over the last 17 years, but it's eye-watering. And it's also time consuming. So we have developers, we have a head of technology, we are always looking 12 months ahead, and there is constant development going on in parallel to the kind of delivery that you guys would be used to seeing Brightside do. But what we have learned, particularly over the last kind of 3 years, when we launched our 4th version of a platform, we're now on our 5th, is the consideration of the fact that there is so much technology out there. So what already exists? What is it that you can use already? So, you know, Brightside has a digital strategy. We have experience of 17 years worth of experience. Are there things that you could learn from us, or are there things that you could learn from Zoom, or are there resources and activities that already exist out there that will meet the outcomes you're looking to achieve, rather than thinking we need to develop in-house from scratch. I promise you it's expensive, and it is time consuming, and it's constant. So do consider what is out there. Research is your friend. The other thing to consider, which for us is a critical success factor, I was talking about those earlier, is onboarding. So how do you get a young person to take up your digital strategy? It might look lovely, but you need to ensure that it is engaging for young people. And both kind of are the digital considerations in here, the onboarding and engagement are the foundations of our digital strategy. Everything that we do is looking to engage a young person. Everything that we do is thinking about how a young person how a young person expects technology to work for them. And at Brightside, that includes kind of factoring in how we recruit and train our mentees, how we recruit and train our mentors, and considering the lead-in times for doing that. It's not immediate. How do you kind of drip feed the idea of digital outreach for a young person? We also consider we have kind of 4 or 5 different ways that we can get a young person onto the platform. And again, we consider kind of the use cases for that. So what way is going to work best for a young person. Then we don't just assume that if you match two people together on a platform, then they will have a kind of impactful relationship immediately. What we do is wrap technology functionality around that to ensure that there are other ways that young people can be engaged and consistently engaged, and that engagement can be sustained throughout the programme. So for at Brightside, we have a mentor matching tool, which is our kind of newest initiative, which enables a young person to kind of have agency in the choice that they are of mentor. So they are able to choose between 5 different mentors that they might want to work with. We have project resources, activities, we have Bright Knowledge. We essentially wrap structure around that kind of one-to-one relationship to ensure that engagement is sustained. The other thing that which is kind of going back to my original point about ensuring that you think about what is already out there, is we have to consider how we run our mentoring platform from kind of time and cost perspective. So we would love to spend more money and more time on the platform, but that has to be proportionate to what we have available to us. And again, that's kind of going back to my point around, is your digital strategy smart? Is it realistic for you? Can you actually deliver on it and achieve the outcomes that you're looking for? And I think that's me, and kind of a whistle-stop tour of how Brightside put together our programmes. As I say, the kind of takeaway is think about outcomes first, and think about what's already out there that you could adapt and use to achieve your outcomes. And yeah, I guess I'll hand over to questions, really.
Hi, Laura. Great. I've got some questions for you. There's been quite a lot of discussion in the chat box, which has been great, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. But if your question isn't answered, don't worry. we will try to answer that in our summary document, which we will send out by the end of this week. So number one, what a lot of the comments have been suggesting that they'd really be interested in hearing about how Brightside captures the data and what examples we have of that. So how do we measure those long-term outcomes? Like, what do we use to capture that information? And just, I guess, around monitoring and evaluating that in more detail.
Sure. So at Brightside, we have, because we have a theory of change, we have what we call our quality and impact frameworks that sit underneath our theory of change. And they look at both kind of the quality of the project whilst it's going on. And we do that essentially because we have an online platform. We have a database that is consistently running. So it will tell us about whether a young person has responded to our invitations to take up the opportunity, whether they've sent messages, how many messages they've sent, how many times they've been on the site, how many times a mentor has communicated with them, whether they have taken part in any of our online activities, and generally just kind of their what we would term their engagement with our intervention. But we also have our impact framework, which is around kind of post-program outcomes. And that's our 6 behavioural outcomes that we're looking to achieve. And we look at that through a compulsory baseline and exit survey, which captures progress that they've made. And then in terms of a long-term tracking, we use HEAT, which is the Higher Education Access Tracker, which a number of you, I'm sure, will be members of or have heard of if you aren't members of, and we were lucky enough to get our first results this summer, which Nan kind of spoke of at the beginning. And for Brightside, that's incredibly important because it tells us about the long-term journey of young people that we've worked with. So we've recently looked at young people who have had online mentoring between 2009 and 2017 and seen where they have ended up. Now that does only specifically look at whether they have accessed higher education, and it doesn't look at those that may have taken alternative routes, which may have been the best route for them. But for us, those results were incredibly powerful, and kind of gave us, as Anand said, I think it's 74% of Q1 Polar 4 Q1 students that had online mentoring have accessed higher education, which against the national average, which is about 24%, is mind-blowing, but also against kind of the other HEAT members, which was, I think, 54, I want to say, percent, could have been in the 60s, but essentially the rest of the HEAT members, if online mentoring has kind of a higher impact if you look at that metric alone, on those from Q1 backgrounds. But what we've also done in order to kind of capture behavioural change, and this is something that came out of the theory of change, and asked us to really look at social capital as something that young people from our kind of target group need in order to succeed, is we launched our alumni network, which is called Connections. And there's currently just over 1,000 young people that are on our Connections kind of program, and it's kind of a way of us both supporting them post a program but also keeping in touch, so that we can kind of get access to that learner voice, and that kind of the kind of more anecdotal experiences of young people around the intervention that they've had. So a number of ways that we do it, both kind of qualitative and quantitative, looking at during a program, post the program, but also that kind of long-term trajectory. As you can tell, I can talk about that for a very long time, so I'm going to shush. Milena, you can ask me another question.
No, great. I think there's been the call for like a more specific session on evaluation and monitoring, so we could talk about that later. Great. So I guess your comments just now kind of lead me into the next question, which is about that digital wealth gap, and kind of understanding whether like technology and digital outreach favors some groups over other groups. and what can we do now to kind of address that and to support us in reaching the groups that need it most, but also how to make sure that engagement for those groups are good. So like I know that we've made an app, and that kind of helps students get on board that don't necessarily have their own laptop at home. But yeah, if you could go into more detail about what initiatives we could do or what exists out there in terms of the digital wealth gap.
Yeah, I mean that is a tough one, and is probably a hard one to kind of address in kind of the immediate environment we have. I mean, at Brightside, we've always been conscious of the fact that we are looking to impact a deprived group. And therefore we cannot make assumptions around their access to the internet and to technology. Now, you can sometimes rely on a school to be able to provide that, but not in all instances. So, there are schools, particularly in very rural and isolated areas, where internet connection is terrible, and they may have really limited resources in terms of technology. And so at Brightside, we've always kind of been conscious of that, and it is one of the reasons why kind of developing an app and ensuring that our platform is mobile optimized has been really crucial in terms of our digital strategy. So the research kind of shows you that while young people may not have constant access to a PC, they are more likely to have access to a smartphone or a mobile phone, and therefore that is the way that you can reach them. One of the things that we've done with the app is ensured that essentially a young person kind of can write messages which are then saved, and when they are able to get online, they're automatically sent, rather than kind of relying upon the fact that they've got a good Wi-Fi connection at all times. It's kind of when it kicks in, then that interaction can happen. But I know that it's something that the sector is very live to at the moment, and I imagine is something that will be considered in a more considered fashion when we go back to the normal world. Aland, have you got anything to add to that?
No, I think you've covered most of the things I would have covered. I mean, I just say, when you're thinking about it from your own perspectives, some of the questions that we ask ourselves regularly at Brightside, which I think are generally applicable, are how do you make it engaging? You've got this issue of young people being very busy, lots of pressures on their time. And that, is one of the reasons why we've looked at things like the app. One of the things that we found helpful is giving young people a sense of agency. Kind of how can we make them feel part of the process? Are they aware of the objectives of the mentoring program that they are on? Do they have agency in terms of the choice of their mentor? So that's one of the reasons that we have developed our mentor matching tool. So giving agency, making it engaging. I think making it fun as well, actually, things which are fun to do, will be more attractive than those that aren't. And one of the things that we're looking to get onto at Brightside, one of our tech development priorities, is to introduce more gamification across our work, and give that sense of accomplishment as people complete different aspects of the mentoring project. So I'd encourage you to think about those kinds of things as well. And yes, in terms of the devices, one of the things that's coming up time and time again in conversations that I'm having about digital access is, what if you don't have access to the laptop? And this is where things like making sure that what you do is mobile enabled. And ideally, and this is where our app comes in really well. I don't know what the latest data is at Brightside, but the last time I looked at it, more than half of mentees were using their mobile phone to get onto the platform. So thinking about how young people access their information is important too. And could I just add something about the question that Laura touched on? I think has come up in one or two of the questions that I've seen in the chat, which is, how do we get from where we are to being able to offer all kinds of digital resources very, very quickly, and there's a conversation going on just at the moment about online tutoring, and I think Michelle's gone from a starting point to being able to launch something within 4 weeks, which is which is great. So one of the things that we think about quite carefully at Brightside is, do we build it or do we buy it? So the Brightside platform is made up of the mentoring platform that we have developed ourselves. So that there's obviously a lot of cost involved in developing that and then maintaining it. But there are features around the side that we have bought in from other providers. So our surveys are conducted through SurveyMonkey, for example. Our newsletters that go out through MailChimp. So we don't reinvent the wheel. We look at what is out there and we make the decision: is it easier to go to buy something off the shelf, easier and cheaper, and not have to worry about maintaining it? And we know there will be lots of people out there to service it. And the downside of that is that you aren't necessarily able to make it look exactly as you would want for your own purposes, versus actually it's probably more straightforward if we do our own bespoke development. But we need to bear in mind that there is a cost in that, and that the number of people or agencies able to maintain that would be fewer. So that build or buy issue is a big one for you to consider.
Yeah, and I think it is for me at the moment, it's that the speed of turnaround. So if you go for an existing provider, then you know that they should be able and quickly be able to answer your question of how long does onboarding take? How long can you have? Give me a branded site. Are you safe? Can you give me your child protection policy and your safeguarding policy? These are, if it's a technology that is built to support young people, if they aren't able to answer those questions, then that's an alarm bell for you. But I guess what we're trying to get across is the principles that you should be thinking about. And I can see kind of in the chat box that there's questions around that. Evaluating and monitoring. They should also be able to tell you what information that they would be able to give you immediately from the kind of use on your part of their platform.
Okay, I'm aware that time is passing and we should probably move on to the next stage of the webinar. There are some other questions that we haven't been able to come on to. But we'll pick those up in the write-up, and maybe you'll have a chance to address those further in the breakout session. So let me just, in a couple of minutes, explain what's going to happen now. It's pretty straightforward. You're going to be divided up in groups of about 8 to 11 people, and you'll be in the breakout session for 20 minutes. There will be a timer. I am told that there will be a buzzer 10 seconds out, so time your comments carefully. The breakouts will automatically come to an end at 20 minutes. The key thing that everyone in your separate groups, could you agree one person to take the notes? Okay, and what we would like that person to do is a couple of things. First of all, you will have your own chat box for your own breakout room, so you can write up the notes there. And there will also be the discussion prompts that will come up as well. I'll come on to that in a second. And what I would like you to do is to prepare to feedback one key takeaway from the discussion. So when we come back together, you will have the main chat box. We won't be able to see the breakout chat boxes. So if you could write your 1 or 2 takeaways into that main chat box, we will then capture it and be able to include that in the write-up. Okay, so you'll have your own breakout room chat box with somebody who'll be taking notes, and then if they can feedback in the when we all come back together. We've given you some discussion prompts here to get the discussion going. You've also obviously had the presentations from Laura and myself, and you've also seen the discussions that are coming up through the chat box. So the questions that we came up with beforehand were, kind of quite general ones. What are your digital delivery challenges? You've already started to share that. How do you currently do your plans, your strategic plans for digital delivery? What are the main opportunities? What are the main barriers? So we've talked about expertise, cost. Do you buy in? Do you build it? How can you hit the ground running? Again, we've started to discuss question 3. Do you have all the expertise you need in-house? And if not, where do you go for support? Are there useful platforms or resources you can signpost colleagues to? I think I saw a comment from Neil in the discussion saying it'd be good to have an audit of what is out there. Perhaps you can use this 20 minutes to share information. And then the final question, which again has just come up, what contingency plans do you have in place for students who only have a smartphone or intermittent internet access? So there are some key questions. You may have others that you wish to discuss. And as I say, please, one note taker per discussion. You can copy and paste what you've written from the breakout chat into the main chat if you want, and be ready to feed back key takeaways. So Milena, would you be able to move people into breakout?
Yes. Doing it right now.